Okay, so in this video, I want to talk about the current state of the Azure end-to-end tests in like TCE end-to-end tests. One moment, let me share my screen and show what's the current state. Um, Too many open tabs. Cool. So this is the current state, and the code is over here, and Karpya /90 slash TCE E2E test. So I excuse me. So I noticed that like we have a good like what do you say, good abstraction over here. For example, a recent commit by Aman created a good abstraction around like what are the tasks to be done when you have a cluster failure, right? Like so in this case is actually the uh, cluster creation failure. So if you notice here, run cluster failure tasks. And then there is also run workload cluster and then workload cluster failure tasks. So there are two kinds of then tasks that we're looking at. One like basically management cluster and workload cluster failure tasks. So this we can actually implement it as a abstraction as an interface where or like what do you say some way to say just cluster failure tasks and internally it will know is it a management cluster or a workload cluster and it will automatically call it. So we just have to say cluster failure task or say deploy cluster failure task. So their creation cluster creation failure tasks. And for example, here we say run cluster. We don't say workload cluster management cluster. Um, are the tasks different a bit to some extent here? We have to look at what's going on over here. One moment. This some sort of like comparison. I have to get back to it. Anyways, so here if you notice, you say for workload cluster, this is especially for Azure actually. This is not generic, but we put it inside utils. We might have to make some changes over here to make it more generic. So workload cluster, we talk about the Azure workload cluster in this case. That's why we get the Azure test secrets and then Azure related Azure identity, AZ identity. And here you can see that we provide the provider, which is always say, Azure in this case. And actually specific to this, there has to be some parameters over here for secrets or some other way of like actually injecting in that, hey, this is the kind of cluster, this is the credentials that you have to use and things like that. Some sort of interface kind of thing, so that you can do some polymorphism kind of stuff over here. So you can see that you say delete resource group. Resource group is a specific thing for Azure. So again, you have to make it generic. So this is very generic though. Collect management cluster and workload cluster diagnostics. Delete context is like generic. Delete context generic. This is again specific to Azure. So this is more related to like clean up the cluster. Force clean up the cluster. This is also force clean up the cluster, but for Azure. So I was actually noticing this kind of like Azure specific things when I tried to actually move this method, this function inside the utils or inside say Azure package. So the Azure package is over here. So I try to move it here in marketplace image. Let me show you how that seemed like. It's slash list. Oops. It's slash list. Apply and then this. So this is about move get Azure marketplace image info for cluster, right? So now you can see the changes actually, and let me show you the changes. So it removes off this get Azure Marketplace image info for cluster from this Azure underscore test file, and then it tries to move it to the Azure package marketplace underscore image file in test utils. So here, if I try to put this in, the first problem that I notice is there is actually a cyclic import problem that comes up. So if you can see here, it says import cycle not allowed. And if you actually write this out, one moment, go list, dun, dun, dun. Okay, should say there is an import. Yeah. So here it says GitHub, and then the Carcass 790 TCE end-to-end test utils Azure. This is importing utils, and utils is yet again importing Azure, which is like a loop now, because Azure imports utils. It's like a loop now. So you can see here that Azure imports utils. Utils is also importing Azure, which is actually not a great thing. Azure importing utils is okay because Azure is a specific thing, and it can use generic stuff like utils. But utils is actually supposed to be a generic thing, and it should not use specific stuff like Azure as much as possible. So if it's importing Azure, there's something wrong. So let's look at where this is being used. Peak references. Peak references, right? So let me actually do Azure dot. So here you can see check env vars. This is actually calling Azure check env vars, and then oops. And then there is the Azure test secrets that I was just talking about, which is actually more specific to Azure. In this case, the function name is still generic, and you have to make this more generic, like the provider and everything. And then there is Azure delete resource group, and then test secrets, Azure delete resource group, and all that, right? So there are like 6 of them, and we should get rid of all these dependencies, right? Only then I can actually move it off so that the number of lines in this code is pretty small, right? So now what I'm going to try to do is basically think about how we can move these to some provider specific stuff so that we can just call interfaces and their methods, and they will just automatically get picked up, right? So let's look at this. First of all, this check in, I'm going to actually check out this whole thing for now. I'm going to get rid of the reference to, so first thing I'm going to do is get rid of Azure import in utils package. This is more like test utils slash utils package, right? So test utils slash utils package. This would mean Azure references. This would mean Azure, for example, say there are only a few references, right? Let's look at them. Azure. So get rid of this. So let's start with that, and then we'll also have to do something like this. And what else? Azure delete resource group. References of test secrets. Delete resource group. Delete resource group. And we also don't need this basically. Okay. So now I'm gonna actually put this as like plan for June 6th MD. And the next thing I'm going to do is move get Azure. to test utils slash Azure package. Test utils slash utils package. This is more specific. So now let's look at this one maybe to start off with, right? So here I don't have anything. Here I have like exactly one thing which is check Azure required Azure ENV bars, and this is being provided by check. Okay, we get the ENV bars like this. For Azure, how do you get the ENV bars? This is Azure login, extract Azure test secrets and ENV bars, check required Azure. Okay. Hmm. We need to do better. Hmm. We need to probably introduce an interface again on here. I'm going to spend some time thinking about what we can do here. I'm going to pause for a moment or let's stop.